definitely like erythritol, soluble fiber. I think they're the main two. We have allulose, so you sort of like combining combination of those ingredients or one or two of them work really well in baked goods.
Yeah, and the stevia is there as well. And, and one other thing I'll mention too is again, depending on the baked good and the particular application, is as Matt mentioned, there's not one single ingredient that may give you everything you need. So it could be a systems approach where you have to look at and say, if you want to get to this level of sweetness and reduce it by this much, you may have to use more than one ingredient. You know, we create plenty of food systems as well that can do that. Again, a lot of it's having that discussion to say, first and foremost, do you have any labeling guidelines? You know, what can and can't be added, right? And understanding that. And then going to understand, okay, then they'll give us here's our toolbox now. Let's worry about the taste and texture of the product. We're going to change anything, how I can process it. So there are multiple factors that go into it. But again, the good thing is the toolbox of solutions is getting bigger and bigger, and especially as the regulatory landscape opens up, so you'll have more options.
I think the main thing is the target sugar reduction level you want to achieve, and depending on that, maybe you can use one or two or three ingredients depending on the target sugar reduction. That's really the key thing. How much sugar do you want to reduce? Yeah. So,
guys, can I also comment? Sorry, comment about your mosaic truffle picture, right? I'm so like impressed by that picture. And I really do think it's a lot to do with the proteins. Correct me if I'm not wrong. You know, is it the proteins that give it its volume that you know that full structure that sugar used to give? You know, usually in truffles it's mostly just sugar, right? Just sugar and chocolate mixed together. Is it you know, my question is like for bulking, right, in that situation, was it the protein that really gave that robust look?
I think it's more the versus the low sugar syrup, the corn syrup. You know, really
The corn syrup.
the bulking and the combination with the allulose is really the bulk that gives you the proteins at a small level. You know, it's not in there at a high level, but it's really around the other bulking ingredients that give you that.
It's a functional build back that you were mentioning, right? And that's part of one thing that we've done a lot is look at we had a functional build back program saying, hey, again, it sounds like a broken record, but you can't maybe do this with one ingredient, but as we understand everything, right? We're taking X amount of sugar out. How do you build back that texture, right? Something else has to be there. Protein could play a part of it. Fibers could play a part of it, and different texturizers as well. But having these functional build back bulking agents like the Versa Sweet and others, that really helps, right? Well, I mean, I don't know, Matt, why you're thinking about too. One thing that you were mentioning is the FMPs as well. Right. So depending on the flavor, if you can comment, that might help, right?
That'd be a cost-effective solution to boost the flavor impact. I would say, you know, you have to also worry about like the regulatory aspects. There's like grass limits in a lot of these bulking agents, so that's why you have to use combinations. So you might allulose might be allowed like 10%, so you have to use another bulking agent. So depending on the sugar reduction level, but you can sort of like I guess you can optimize the ingredients in there to sort of, you know, extend or give you more sweetness boost. That helps a lot in combination with stevia. So it's really like a balancing act. You're trying to balance all these different, you know, toleration issues and grass limits and their solubility and chain length. So it's really a balancing act. But I think if you can maybe play around with different levels, you might be able to optimize, you know, the flavor and the impact in your application.
Well, I mean, I guess that it's probably application specific.
Yeah.
But if you had to give an example, maybe that one you had.
Yeah, I know like in bars, we've done like up to 60% reduced sugar. I know in like cookies, we've done like 50, 55. There is a limit in certain applications where you just can't push the envelope anymore. So it really depends on the application. And, you know, I think if you go all polyols, you could probably do like no sugar added.
Yeah.
But then you run into lactation issues and stuff like that. So I think using these other more clean label ingredients, you know, you're probably 50, 60% is sort of like a maximum target before you start to see a lot of defects. sensory defects in the product.
And we were mentioning up front, for the insight piece, listen, the eating experience is important, right? In a lot of these applications, so you don't want to take it to the point where the consumer's not going to want to try or eat the product because it doesn't taste good, right? It has to taste good. So if you can't deliver 60%, maybe you could do 40 and at least give the option, right? And that might be good enough for now, where it tastes good. And then maybe, who knows, down the road, you develop one that's 50 or 60. As far as low GI, that's a little bit different, but I know we've done a lot of work in gluten-free and sugar-reduced cookies and different products like that. Where we consider, again, it depends a lot on how much sugar you're reducing, but we have bulk ingredients and systems, whether they're flours or components and texturizers, that can help you make a gluten-free cookie and give you the eating experience that you want, right? In combination with that, if you're reducing sugar, Matt was talking about some of those products that you could. The lower GI part, that's a little tricky is to.
Most of them have a low GI, like the soluble fibers and polyols, even like resistant starch can be used to replace the wheat flour.
Yeah.
So there's different options there too. I'd say most of the bulky ingredients we're looking at are low GI.
Yeah.
So, Matt, I was going to ask you, you mentioned resistant starch. You have resistant starch in your portfolio?
Yes, we have high base 260, which is a RS2 type, and then we have a few RS4 types on different sources like tapioca, potato, that can be used as well for flour replacement. That's another option, FBB, if you wanted to do flour replacement to achieve fiber claims or resistant starch content, you can do that as well.
Yeah, we use a lot of, in our consulting, we use a lot of RS4 type in a tapioca base and corn base as well for gluten-free formulation. And also for low GI, I think you can also look into like whole sorghum flours because sorghum is very well known for low GI. And you're working in a gluten-free, sugar-free niche. Hats off to you. It's going to be a challenge. It's just like sugar, right? You use sugar at a good level, you're not going to go wrong. But if you use sugar in excess, you're going to go wrong somewhere, right? For me, it's just eating too much sugar and going way above my blood sugar, right? I mean, it's the same thing with any sweeteners out there that you use. It's like a little bit okay, but if you eat like a whole bowl of, I don't know, stevia in a day, that's not going to do you any good, So I think health concerns wise, I mean, these are regulated, and I believe they are FDA approved at the, amount that they are used per day. So follow those guidelines.
But I would agree, that they're FDA approved, the grass, so it's safe to use. But yeah, of course, to most of what you said, if you overdo anything, obviously, if you're a diabetic, you have to be careful of how much you intake, right? If you have a certain condition, that would have to be at the top of your mind and understanding it. But for the most part, these are all approved and safe to be used within the guidelines.
Yeah, the grass levels are sort of based on your exposure during the day. So, like Cara mentioned, everything in moderation, sort of the key thing. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's not good to consume like, I mean, if you're gonna consume like over the regulation of say maybe allulose in a day, I think you need to be eating like a lot of muffins or a lot of cakes to get there. So I don't think any of us are going to eat, cake throughout the whole day. So I don't think that's going to be a problem there. People look at it as a plug and play situation. It's not a plug and play situation, right? There is a need for us to reduce sugar. It's not a possibly, or I want to do this, but I can't. It's a must have, right? This is a must have in your portfolio. So yes, there might be a little cost increase over sugar, but you're going to reach more people and you're going to create products that are more innovative. So in that aspect, there is a cost to innovation, and this is the cost, right? So there is a small cost, and also when you buy, sweeteners, they are so sweet and they are so intense that you use a little bit, but I think the cost comes from, you know, the build back, the bulking and all that stuff. That's the cost, right? But you gotta also know sugar is so cheap, and it's been our go-to ingredient for the longest time. If we have any problems, just put in more sugar. If a shelf life issue, put in more sugar, right? So now we're realizing as bakers, as we take out sugar, there are all these other things that we have to replace with it, and it increases the overall cost of that product. But that is, to me, that is the price for innovation. And also it's a necessary thing to do as you bake for the future, because that sugar added line is just not going to make you sustainable for the future of baking.
Yeah, and I'll just quickly add to that, into your statement, which I agree. In the insight pieces I presented up front, again, consumers are looking for this, they're asking for it. And there is also a willingness to say, hey, I want to pay for quality and premium. And if they're saying, hey, I'm looking for sugar reductions, they're understanding, hey, I may have to pay a little bit more for this, right? And that's just something that if you want something on the label, I want it to be no added sugars, that there's an understanding now that, yes, it will cost me a little bit more.
Thank you. So I think we have come to the end of our Q&A. So thank you everyone for coming on. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Ricardo. You know, it's been such an engaging seminar, because all of us are looking at you to give us the tools to reduce the sugar in our formulation. If you need any kind of information or samples, reach out to Ricardo. I believe his email is on here. Yeah. And we can go from there. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Ricardo. Maria.
Thank you all.
Thanks
Take
for
care.
coming.